he was talking about the quality of patience. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about patience, He says, Inna Allah ma'as sabirin. Allah is with those who have patience. So if we want the togetherness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should have patience. But how do we acquire this? So he goes on to say that the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in proportion, direct proportion to the amount of patience you have with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the more you exercise patience, be it with your employee, be it with your employer, be it with your wife, be it with your husband, you exercise a true patience, a beautiful patience, then what happens in the process of doing that, because you are being magnanimous to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that endears you to the creator of that creation, and you gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if ever we need an incentive, Imams maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes late, and Allah reward you. So while you're sitting there, think to yourself, even sometimes it's testing, your patience are being tested. Somebody says just the thing that's going to get you upset. Think about it, the more patience I have with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in proportion to that I gain proximity and closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah grant us His closeness. And in everything what we do, may we see and may we realize the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we were speaking about, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah was speaking about the seminal importance of the acquisition of knowledge. And of late, I've come to find that people of knowledge, of proper knowledge, without being arrogant, and rightly so, they treat people with lesser knowledge with a certain degree of disdain. That because ignorance is the root cause of all our problems. Ignorance is the root cause of all our problems. Social problems, economic problems, financial problems, whatever the nature of the problem is, ignorance is the root cause of all of those problems. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to end the age of ignorance, we refer to it as Ayyamul Jahiliyyah, the days of ignorance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the light. You want to remove the darkness, what do? You bring the light. So, if you come to a room, the room is dark, what do? You don't tackle the darkness, you switch on the light. When the light comes, automatically the darkness dissipates, it vanishes. So Allah brought the light, and the light came in the form of the Quran. And the very first verse of the Quran says, Iqra, read, educate yourself. And the tool of education, of enlightenment is to read. And further on in the same chapter, Allah talks about the pen being another instrument for learning. So reading and writing, these are instruments of learning to educate ourselves. So education is very important. Knowledge, particularly that knowledge which will guide us to and guide us along this right path, is very important. And the Prophet ﷺ, putting knowledge into perspective. You and I might ask ourselves, how can a learned person look at an ignorant person with disdain? Not disdain in terms of looking down. We don't look down on people. Because before you look down, before somebody falls in your estimation, before that happens, you've already fallen in the estimation of Allah. We don't look down at people as such. But to understand in terms of the concept of what a problem ignorance is, on whatever level, let us listen to the words of the Prophet ﷺ. What does he say? He says, he talks about فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ, the excellence of a person who knows over the person who does not know. I forget the latter part of the narration, as I wasn't planning to speak about that particularly, but it's something along the lines of like the excellence of the sun over the other stars, or the excellence of the Prophet over the least of his followers. In other words, there's a big discrepancy, and it talks about knowledge, the importance of knowledge. And knowledge also, it has so many different benefits in terms of, sometimes we think about working harder, working smarter, not harder. That has a basis in Islam. And if you're able to work smarter and not harder, it means you know something somebody else doesn't know. On one occasion, the Prophet saw one of his wives, after the morning prayer, they were engaged in Dhikr, remembrance of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ returned and said to her that I've recited 3 words that outweighs what you have recited from the time you're sitting here up until now. Subhanallah bihamdi adada khalqi wa rida nafsi wa zinata arshi wa midada kalimati. And that's an example of working smart and hard. But all this, you are able to do all of this, why? On the virtue of knowledge. Knowledge is very, very, very important. May Allah grant us beneficial knowledge. Knowledge that will raise us. Knowledge that will avail us in this world as well as in the year after. Imam Ghazali, very importantly, he starts off by mentioning we shouldn't be seeking knowledge for the wrong reasons. Uniquely, he mentions later on that, the acquisition of knowledge, some of us might be here because, by way of example, I can't stand up because everybody else is sitting. So that's the intention, that's my intention. Look, I actually want to move, but because everybody else is sitting, I can't move. So your intention perhaps is not purely for the sake of Allah SWT. But knowledge is such that it can start off by being for the wrong reasons. Like Imam Ghazali himself, when they started studying, they were orphans, both him and his brother, and they needed a place to stay. And the only place to stay was the hostel, which happened to be the School of Islamic Learning. So that's initially how it started. So you can maybe acquire something, perhaps not with the best of intentions, but intention is always something that can be remade and renewed. So Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he highlights it's very important that the intention behind the acquisition of knowledge must be only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it mustn't be for any other purpose, particularly for a worldly purpose. And that brings us now really to the point where we're supposed to start off, inshallah, but we'll start with that point tomorrow. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he talks about the 3 categories of people that acquire knowledge. 3 categories of people that acquire knowledge. Inshallah, when we meet tomorrow, we'll read the text and we'll discuss that. Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah increase you in patience.
Ameen.
And bless all of us with patience. Embellish our lives with patience. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.